banquet hall went silent the way a room does when everyone is suddenly afraid of being the one who speaks next. My father stood at the head table with a champagne flute already raised, and his voice didn't waver. "This dinner is for the people who built this company," he said, looking right at me. "Family who actually showed up. So if you're not on the list, the door's behind you." I had already set my napkin down. I remember thinking, calmly, almost gratefully, that at least I could leave before the soup. I had gotten good at leaving before things got worse. But before I could push my chair all the way back, a hand came to rest on my forearm. Light, deliberate, the kind of touch that asks permission and gives reassurance at the same time. "Mom," my sister's husband said, loud enough that the nearest tables turned, "stay. I think it's time the room understood who you actually are." 40 faces swung toward me. My father's color drained out of his face like water out of a cracked glass. And for one ugly second, I wished my brother-in-law had just let me walk out the door, because I had spent 11 years making sure no one in this family ever had to know. 4 hours earlier, I'd been standing in a Holiday Inn Express bathroom in Cedar Falls, pinning my hair up with the same 2 bobby pins I'd carried through 3 duty stations, telling myself this was a normal thing that normal families did. My father was retiring. 31 years running the equipment leasing business my grandfather had started, with 2 flatbed trucks and a handshake, and the company was throwing him a dinner at the Black Hawk Hotel downtown. I'd found out about it the way I found out about most family things now, second-hand, from a voicemail my aunt left that she clearly assumed someone else had already passed along. "It's the 14th, sweetheart. Black tie-ish. You're coming, right?" I'd listened to it twice in a parking lot in San Diego and then booked a flight I couldn't entirely afford on a captain's housing allowance, because some part of me still answers when family calls, even when family has stopped expecting an answer. I wore a grey dress I'd bought at a Macy's outlet 2 years ago for a funeral. No jewelry except my mother's watch, which still ran if you wound it every morning. I didn't bring anything that said what I did for a living. I never did. That was the whole arrangement. The unspoken one. The one I'd built brick by brick over more than a decade. My father thought I'd washed out of college, knocked around with no direction, and ended up in some forgettable government clerk job that kept me conveniently far away during every Thanksgiving and every hospital stay. I had let him think it. It was easier than the truth, and the truth had never once made him proud, so I'd stopped offering it. The Black Hawk lobby smelled like lilies and old radiator heat. I came in through the side because the front had a little welcome table with a clipboard and a girl in a headset, and I didn't want to find out whether my name was on the list. I slid into the ballroom and took a chair at a back table next to a coat rack and a ma'am I didn't recognize, who turned out to be a vendor's accountant. Nobody waved me over. My cousin caught my eye, gave me the kind of smile you give a stranger who looks vaguely familiar, and turned back to her phone. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. I'm good at waiting. I once sat in a windowless room for 19 hours, waiting for a weather window that decided 31 people's lives, and I didn't fidget once. A retirement dinner held no terrors for me. Or so I told myself. My sister found me before my father did. She came across the floor in a dark green dress with her hair done professionally, and for a moment I saw the kid who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, and my chest did something complicated. "You came," she said, and I couldn't read whether it was relief or panic. "Of course I came, Em," I said. "We don't use her full name in the family. She's been Em since she could talk." "Dad's going to be weird about it," she said, lowering her voice. "He's had a couple already. Maybe just, keep your head down." I told her I always kept my head down. She almost laughed, and then her husband appeared at her elbow with 2 glasses of water, and she introduced us like we'd never met, which we basically hadn't. He'd married into the family 18 months ago at a courthouse I wasn't invited to. He shook my hand. looked at me a half-second too long and said it was good to finally meet me. I thought nothing of it. People say that. My father saw me during the third toast, not a relative's toast, his own, the one he gave thanking himself in the gracious way men like him have perfected. His eyes swept the room the way they always did when he wanted to be sure of his audience, and they snagged on me at the back table and stopped. He didn't smile. He set his jaw, finished his sentence, and didn't look at me again until the salads were cleared, when he came across the floor with the deliberate walk of a man who has decided something. "What are you doing here?" "No hello." 11 years, and the first words were a complaint. "Aunt Carol invited me," I said. "I came for your retirement." "My retirement is for people who were part of it." He kept his voice low, but low for my father is still meant to be overheard. "You weren't part of anything. You disappeared." "I'll sit in the back," I said. "I won't make it about me. I just wanted to be here. You've never once been here when it counted." He glanced at the head table, at the empty chair beside his where my mother would have sat if she was still alive, and something in his face curdled. "Your mother was in that hospital for 4 months. 4 months! And you sent flowers." I had sent more than flowers. I'd flown back twice on emergency leave and slept in a vinyl chair by her bed and held a basin while she was sick from the chemo, and she had asked me in a whisper not to tell him I'd had to fight my command to be there, because she didn't want him using my absence as a weapon and didn't want him using my presence as one either. She'd understood me better dying than he had my whole life. But I wasn't going to say any of that in a ballroom over melting butter pats. "I was there more than you know," I said. "Don't." He held up a hand, not to silence me so much as to keep me from embarrassing him with an explanation. "Just don't. Tonight is hard enough." And there it was, the thing I'd flown 2,000 miles to hear, without admitting that's what I come for, the proof that nothing had changed and probably never would. I stood up. I smoothed the grey dress. "Okay," I said. "I'll go." And I meant it. I genuinely meant it, and that's the part people never believe when I tell this story, that I wasn't waiting to be stopped. I had my purse on my shoulder and my exit mapped, side door, valet, gone. That's when my brother-in-law set down his water glass and stood. "Sir," he said to my father, polite as Sunday, "could you give me 1 minute before she leaves?" My father looked at him like he was a chair that had spoken. "This is family business." "I know," he said. "I married into it 18 months ago, and ever since then I've been hearing one version of your older daughter, and tonight I watched the woman herself sit alone at a back table for 2 hours without complaining once, and the two things don't match. So I'd like 1 minute." The room had gone quiet in patches, the way a field goes quiet when a hawk's shadow crosses it. My sister put her hand on her husband's arm. "Honey," she said, "not now." He said gently, "I love you, and I'm not doing this to wreck your dad's night. I'm doing it because I think we've all been lied to, and not by her." He turned to me then, and his eyes were kind in a way that frightened me more than my father's contempt ever had. "Mom, please don't leave yet." It was the mom that did it. I felt the floor tilt, because the only people who call me ma'am in that particular register, that reflexive spine-straightening way, are people who've worn the uniform, and I scanned the room the way you scan a tree line. And that's when I saw him, 2 tables over, a heavy-set older man in a dark suit who I'd clocked on the way in as somebody's grandfather had gone very still, his fork down, watching me with an expression I knew. I'd seen it across briefing tables and on flight lines. Recognition. Of all the rooms in all the towns in Iowa, the retired Master Chief who'd served under me on the baton had married into the catering family. I would find that out later. In the moment, I only knew that a door I had spent 11 years holding shut had just blown open. "You don't know what you're talking about," my father said to my brother-in-law, and for the first time his certainty had a hairline crack in it. She tell you some story? She's good at stories. She tells everyone she's got some big career, and then we never see proof, never see a paycheck, never see her at a single, I've never told anyone anything, I said. My own voice surprised me. Quiet, but it carried because I have a voice that's been trained to carry over rotor wash, and I've forgotten to keep it small. That's the part you've never been able to forgive me for, isn't it? That I never explained myself. Because there was nothing to explain. He said it to the room now, not to me, performing the way he performed, turning my silence into his evidence. She vanished into thin air for years at a time. No calls, no visits. You want to know where your tax dollars go? They go to people like her sitting at a desk somewhere doing nothing. I should have let it go. I'd let it go 100 times. Birthdays, the funeral, every holiday I spent on a ship or in a tent, eating off a tray while he carved a turkey and told the table I'd been too busy to bother. I had a lifetime of practice swallowing it. But the Master Chief 2 tables over was on his feet now, slowly, the way a big man stands when his knees have given 30 years to steel decks, and he wasn't going to let me swallow it this time. Sir, he said, and his voice filled the room without rising the way command voices do. I don't know you, and it's not my place, but that's not a woman who sat at a desk doing nothing. He looked at me and his eyes asked the question. I gave him the smallest shake of my head, please. Not here. And he held my gaze for a long second, and then did the thing that men like him do. The thing that's half loyalty and half stubbornness and all decency. He ignored me. I served under her, he said. USS Bataan, and before that the relief lights out of the earthquake in Haiti. I've watched this woman make calls that kept my whole crew breathing. So whatever story's been told about her in this family, I'd think hard about repeating it, because it's wrong, and it's beneath the lady it's about. You could have heard a pin drop into carpet. My father's mouth opened and nothing came out. My sister had both hands over hers, and my brother-in-law, quiet again now that someone else had carried it, just looked at me with something like vindication on my behalf, as if he'd known all along he was right to stop me. What is he talking about? My father said finally, and it wasn't a demand anymore. It was a small voice. A scared one. What does he mean, mate calls? What were you, some kind of, I fly helicopters, dad? 11 years and it came out so simply. I'm a commander in the Navy. I run a search and rescue squadron out of San Diego. The years you thought I was hiding from this family, I was pulling fishermen off sinking boats and flying wounded Marines off mountainsides. That clerk job you've been telling everyone about, the one that proves I'm a disappointment? It doesn't exist. It never did. I let you believe it because every single time I tried to tell you the truth, you found a way to make it small, and I got tired of handing you things just so you could shrink them. The silence after that wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that comes after a window breaks, when everyone's still processing the sound. My sister was crying quietly, the careful crying of a woman in stage makeup. You never told me, she whispered, and that one landed somewhere the rest didn't, because she was right, and she deserved better from me, and I'd lumped her in with him for too long. I should have, I told her. I'm sorry. I thought if I told you, you'd have to choose, and I didn't want to put that on you. She came around the table and put her arms around my neck, and her bouquetless wedding hands clutched the back of my funeral dress. And I held my baby sister in the middle of a banquet hall while 40 people pretended not to watch, and for the first time in 11 years I felt like I was holding something instead of carrying it. My father didn't move. He stood there with his retirement champagne going flat in his hand and the 31 years of certainty he'd built about his older daughter coming down around him in pieces, and I watched him try to find footing in a story that no longer had any flaw. You let me believe it, he said, not angry, hollowed out. You wanted to believe it, I said, and it wasn't cruel, it was just true. It was easier for you than being proud of something you didn't understand. I joined to get away from a house where the only way to earn your love was to want the things you wanted. And I built a whole life out here, you never once asked about. You didn't ask tonight either, before you decided to throw me out. He sat down, just lowered himself into the nearest chair like his legs had quit. The Master Chief gave me a small nod and a smaller smile and sat down too, his part done the way a good crew member does the job and then gets out of the way. The room slowly remembered it was a party. A cousin started clapping, uncertainly, and a few people joined, and somebody, mortified, turned the background music back up, and the whole machinery of the evening clanked back into motion around the wreckage at our table. I found my father later out on the hotel's little brick terrace, where the smokers go, though he'd quit years ago. He was holding the railing with both hands and looking out at the parking lot like it might explain something. The Iowa cold had teeth. I came and stood beside him and didn't say anything, because I'd learned a long time ago that the first one to talk usually says the wrong thing. Your mother knew, he said. It wasn't a question. She knew the whole time. She did. That's why she'd get that look. When I'd go off about you at dinner. He shook his head slowly. She'd get up and clear the plates. I thought she was tired. His voice cracked on the last word, and he pressed his lips together hard, furious at himself for it. She let me make a fool of myself for years, and she never said a word. She wanted you to figure it out on your own, I said. She thought it would mean more that way. I think she ran out of time waiting. He was quiet a long while. The flag over the hotel entrance snapped in the wind. Somewhere behind us, the muffled thump of a band starting up. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. I don't know how to be the guy who was wrong about his own kid for 30 years. I don't have a... He made a helpless gesture with one hand. I don't have a speech for that. I don't want a speech, I said. I've heard all your speeches. He almost laughed. It came out as a rough exhale. Fair. You don't fix this tonight, I told him. You can't. There's 11 years of birthdays and a funeral and a hospital room in there. But you could start by telling people the truth. And you could stop using Mom like a closing argument. She wouldn't want that. She'd hate it, actually. His jaw worked. He nodded once, hard, the way he nods when he's agreeing to something that costs him. She would, he admitted. She'd be furious with me right now. He turned and looked at me properly, maybe for the first time all night, maybe for the first time in much longer than that. Are you, he started and stopped and tried again. Are you happy out there? With all of it? The question knocked the wind out of me because he had never once asked it. Not when I commissioned, not when I deployed, not ever. I'm good at it, I said, which wasn't an answer, and we both heard that. That's not what I asked. I looked at the parking lot for a while. I'm tired, I said. And I'm lonely in the specific way you get lonely when your own family thinks you're a failure and you let them. So, I'm working on the happy part. He took that. He didn't try to fix it or argue it or turn it into a thing about himself, which for my father was a kind of miracle. Come back inside, he said. It's freezing. And there's a Master Chief in there who looks like he wants to buy you a drink and tell everybody embarrassing stories, and I think you should let him. We went back in. He didn't tap a glass and make an announcement. He didn't perform an apology the way he performed everything else. But when his old business partner cornered him near the bar and asked with raised eyebrows whether it was true, whether his daughter was really some kind of Navy pilot, I was close enough to hear my father answer. He didn't puff up about it. He didn't get small either. He just said, Commander. Runs her own squadron. A pause. I should have been bragging about her for years. My fault I wasn't. And then he changed the subject, fast, because that was about all the humility one night could hold. And I let him have that, because a man learning a new language at 61 is going to fumble the grammar, and it was enough that he was trying to speak it at all. I flew back to San Diego 2 days later. Nothing was healed exactly. You don't seal over 11 years in a weekend, and we both knew it. But he texts me now, badly, with too many periods, asking about the weather over the Pacific and whether I'm sleeping enough, and I answer him, and that's more than we had. My sister and I talk every Sunday. The Master Chief did buy me that drink, and he did tell embarrassing stories, and my father laughed at every one of them like a man making up for lost time. Here's the only thing I'd ask you to carry out of all this, if you carry anything. Be careful about the story you've decided to believe about someone, especially someone who's gone quiet on you. Quiet isn't the same as empty. The ones who don't defend themselves are sometimes just tired of having their truth made small. Ask the quiet ones what they actually do all day. Ask them if they're okay. Ask before you stand up at the head of a table and tell them where the door is, because you might be wrong about who they are, and you might not get 11 more years to find out. I think about that grey funeral dress more than I should. For 11 years, I let it stand in for who I was at home, something quiet and forgettable, because I'd decided that disappearing hurt less than being shrunk. That was the mistake under all the other mistakes. I told myself I was protecting my peace by staying silent with my father. But silence isn't the same as peace. It's just a debt you pay later with interest. M paid part of it. My father paid part of it. I paid the most of all, sitting alone at back tables convincing myself I didn't mind. The thing I got wrong was thinking the honorable choice and the easy choice were the same. They almost never are. It would have been right to tell Em the truth years ago, even knowing it might force her to take sides. Because love that asks you to stay in the dark isn't really protecting anyone. Doing the decent thing usually costs something up front, and I kept choosing the version that cost me nothing in the moment and everything over time. Calvin understood that better than I did. He'd known me 18 months, and he was willing to take the hit of an awkward dinner to do right by someone who couldn't do it for herself. That's the kind of courage I'd mistaken for recklessness my whole career, the willingness to be uncomfortable now, so the truth can stand. What saved that night wasn't my rank. Sutton standing up didn't fix anything by itself. What started to fix it was the moment on that cold terrace when I finally stopped managing my father and just told him the plain truth, that I was tired and lonely and working on the happy part. It took more nerve to say that than to fly into a storm, because there's no training for it. Strength isn't only the thing that gets you through a rescue at 3 a.m. Sometimes it's the much smaller, much harder act of staying in the room with someone who's hurt you and refusing to either attack them or vanish on them. If you take anything from Reese's night, let it be this. Look hard at the story you built about the quiet person in your life, and ask yourself whether you built it because it was true or because it was convenient. Use your head before you use your judgment on someone, because my father had 31 years of information and still got me completely wrong, mostly because he never once asked. And when you finally know the truth, find the spine to say it out loud and kindly, the way Em did when she whispered that I'd never told her. We don't owe everyone our whole story, but the people who love us, we owe at least the chance to be proud of us. Don't make them wait 11 years. Don't make them find out from a stranger standing 2 tables over.